Hello and welcome to the live stream. Today we are talking about the new Rodecaster Duo. I've actually got one on my desk right now. By the way, I should say right off the back, thank you to Rode for sending me this for review. Although I've got to be honest, as soon as I saw it announced in NAB in Las Vegas, I already knew that I was going to be getting one because I just could see from the specs that it was going to be the perfect Rodecaster for me, even though the Rodecaster Pro 2 was also the perfect Rodecaster. But I'll get into that in a little moment. But I have got them all on my desk so you can see them for sort of comparison as to the various different sizes of them. Not that one. Let me get to the right scene. Oh, I'm starting off so well today, aren't I? Let me try that again. Here we go. I've got the Rodecaster Duo here, the Streamer X, and also the Rodecaster Pro 2. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about the different devices and sort of compare them, but then I will go through sort of all of the functionality of the Rodecaster Pro, of the Rodecaster Duo as well. But if you are already familiar with the Rodecaster range, maybe you are a Rodecaster Pro 2 user or have read up about that, then certainly this is going to seem very familiar because what they've actually done is just packed all of the same awesome power and in terms of audio processing and audio routing into a smaller form factor. And from what I can make out from my limited time of a few days working with it, there isn't really any sacrifice that's been made by reducing that, except for obviously with the Rodecaster Duo, we've got 2 XLR mic inputs and headphone outputs. And then with the Rodecaster Pro 2, we've got 4 of each of those as well. However, the Rodecaster Duo does add in a headset jack, which gives you an additional mic input and also additional headphone output. Albeit that can't be used sort of controlled separately to the headphone one jack, but we'll get into that. But certainly, as I say, there hasn't really been much sacrifice made. You know, often when you scale things down, there are some sacrifices made, but it doesn't seem to have been the case in this case. And certainly for the kind of demographic, if you want to put it in personally like that, of people that I tend to be talking to, who are generally more like people who are using all of this equipment to level up their audio and video in their online meetings and Zoom calls and things like that, or maybe sort of solo creators, then the Rodecaster Duo could just well be the sort of perfect device if you want that sort of on-desk mixer experience, as opposed to obviously something like the Streamer X, which I've already covered, which is great if you just want to level up your audio and video and still have control of your presentations and things like that. So I'll talk more about the differences in a little while. Hello to everyone in the chat. Let's have a look who is here. Hey, Danny Brown Podcasts, great to see you. Love my RCP2, but man, wish I'd known about the Duo. Was it on its way? I know it's. The thing about it is, if you've only got a couple of mic inputs that you want to bring in, you're not doing like an in-person 4-person show, then yeah, the Duo is great. I'm thinking that there are going to be people who will be, just want the smaller form factor, and so will maybe, sell the Rodecaster Pro 2 to go to get the smaller one. And it's not a downgrade in any respect; it's just a smaller form factor in my mind for depending on what you are what you're needing. Ordered the Rodecaster Duo, will be my first ever device like this. Oh, wow, you're going to be in for a treat then, Victor, because, I remember when I got my Rodecaster Pro 2, which was my first Rodecaster, it just kind of blew my mind, really, and what it enabled me to do, and knowing what you do as well, Victor, then yeah, it's good. You're gonna love it. Hey, Keely, great to see you here. Oh, thanks. I'm glad you've liked the course, Danny. Great to hear that. I'll mention that a little bit later, but thanks for that. I'm glad you found it useful. So let's start then and talk about a little bit more detail about some of the differences between these devices. So if I come to the top-down shot, here is the sort of comparison of size. Obviously, the Rodecaster Pro 2, which now suddenly I've had this one on my desk since it arrived, and then I've just brought this one back out to show you, although I do keep this one switched on and in view because it looks so pretty. But now that I've got this on my desk, it suddenly feels like huge compared to the Rodecaster Duo. And then here is the Streamer X. Now, what we've actually got then in the Rodecaster Duo is, whereas here we've got 6 physical faders and 3 virtual faders, and I'll go through all this in more detail a bit later. On the Rodecaster Duo, there are 4 physical faders and 3 virtual faders. Instead of the 8 smart pads that we've got over here, on the Rodecaster Duo, there are 6 smart pads, again with multiple pages. To be honest with you, the smart pads are something that I don't tend to use myself that much. I use them for like a music bed on my podcast, so I can fade that in and out, but I don't use them for a whole lot more actually at the moment. So for me, you know, having just 6 on here, and again, you've got multiple pages, so you can page through and add up to, I think, up to 64. Might need to check that number if it's different on this one, actually. But you've got multiple pages, so there's plenty of scope there to add different things in. So as I say, for me, that wasn't a sacrifice coming from 8 down to 6. The actual size of the screen is the same, and the interface is all the same. The operating system, or the firmware, I should say, is all exactly the same, or well, relatively. You know, in terms of the functionality, is going to be the same on here. One thing that you don't have on the Rodecaster Duo that is on the Rodecaster Pro 2 is the big record button. So now that is just a software record button, and that is in place of the little icon that we've got up here to say there's different show profiles essentially that you can have on the Rodecaster Pro 2. So they've just replaced that icon with the record button, which again doesn't really feel like a sacrifice. I tend to be in just one profile anyway, so I don't necessarily need that to be you know, to indicate which profile I'm in. And so yeah, having the record button there just seems perfectly logical and not an issue at all. Then you've got the rotary encoder, which is exactly the same. Now, when I first started using this, I had one potential criticism in my mind that I was thinking about, and it was so minor, it's laughable really. But it is that the rotary encoders on the headphone sockets, or the headphone outputs on the Rodecaster Pro 2, have got this little line, and basically it is a fixed travel encoder. So it goes from here at 0, and then you can turn it all the way up to here, and that is maximum. And you can see the little line here to indicate the position of it. And at first, I noticed that this was missing off this one. And what they'd done is there's a really nice function on the Rodecaster or the Rode X that I'd first seen on the Rode X, Streamer X, which is that as you turn the dial, because it doesn't have a screen, obviously, like the Rodecaster Pro 2 or the Duo, then the actual glowing illumination around the encoder there, that indicates the level. So you can see that I've now turned this one down, and the illumination is just, you know, whatever it is, 25, 30% or something like that. So that is actually an indicator of the level. And they've got the same thing on here. So if I was to turn this one down, for example, you'll see how now it's completely out, the light. And as I turn it up, it sort of increases that illumination around the outside. So it is a really nice indicator. But actually, one thing for these is I always like the fact that you can just see easily exactly the level that it is set to. Although, you know, you can kind of hear it in your ears, can't you? But you may be adjusting this for different people. So at first, although I like this function on here, I wasn't too sure about it on this. But then I suddenly realized that, well, actually what they've done is they've taken these buttons and put them on here, which means that these have also got the same push button functionality. Now, at the moment, I don't really see that is doing anything. However, it is essentially in there then as a potential function. So I'd be interested to see what happens with this in the future, because these could, in theory, you know, switch between different outputs. I did wonder if it was to do with the headset on the front, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Does it switch between those two? Although it didn't seem to be doing that to me. But in any case, if that is my only little criticism, the lack of a white dash on that dial there, yeah, that says something really, doesn't it? And what happens then with these rotary encoders is obviously these ones you go from one side to the other, and then that is, you know, minimum and maximum. Whereas what you'll find with these is obviously they are sort of continuous movement, and it's not a one-for-one correlation. So if this is, you know, here and I turn it all the way around to the other side, that's not necessarily going from minimum to maximum, which in theory then obviously means you've got a higher degree of, you know, higher degree of adjustability, if that is even a term. So in any case, I digress slightly, but yeah, those dials then are for the headphone outputs. And as I say, they are the same dials, it seems, as on here, albeit the LED is slightly different. The other thing then, in terms of, you know, what's different about the Rodecaster Pro 2 to the Duo, obviously, it's a smaller form factor, so there is you know, less travel on these faders. Here we've got this travel here, which is this much, and obviously to get these you know, this shorter form factor, we haven't got as much travel in these faders. But really, that doesn't feel at all like any sacrifice. I know if you go into a, you know, a recording studio, you'll see the big mixing boards, and they've got these massive things because they want massive faders because they want to have you know, really fine adjustment, but certainly for what I'm doing, I mean, the difference in that is just it's a non-issue whatsoever, and you can still clearly see the you know, the level on here. I suppose technically because of the sort of whatever they call it, linear encoder. It's got to be slightly, lower resolution, I guess is the word. Is that the word? Than on this one. But as I say, it's just it feels perfectly natural, and these almost feel like too much travel now. So I actually just prefer this type of fader. I do like having physical faders rather than the dials, obviously, that we've got on the Streamer X, but that's a different a different product, and obviously they're trying to keep things compact there. But yeah, I actually prefer the faders on here because it feels like you can just easily, even just feel where it is, have your finger on it, and move it the full range of movement if you need to. So that feels perfectly fine. The actual hardware itself all feels exactly the same quality that we've become accustomed to with the Rodecaster Pro 2. That is a high quality, obviously. So I really like that. The feel of all the buttons is got exactly the same tactile feel to them as well. The actual smart pads themselves are slightly smaller, so they are in fact the same size as the Streamer X, as opposed to this one, which is, it's only fractionally smaller. But so as well as having obviously 6 instead of 8, they're also closer together slightly, and they're smaller, so just helps to fit it into that compact form factor. And once again, this doesn't feel like a sacrifice at all. These buttons, yeah, they're great to be able to just know exactly where they are and hit them, but I don't think anyone's going to have any trouble hitting those. So once again, just getting it all condensed down like that, it just feels great. So let's talk about then some of the differences in terms of the ports, and let's just take a quick look around this device. A bit better than just the top-down shot there. There you can see the faders, the smart pads. That on the front there was the little jack for the headset. So this is just on the front. Something that the Rodecaster Pro 2 doesn't have is this jack, and that enables you to plug in a headset. So that gives you obviously the headphones, but also if you've got a mic attached, then it will give you another mic input. Now that audio going into those headphones, so as an output, is also controlled by the same dial that we've got for the main headphones. So this one just up here. So this will be controlling the audio for your headphones on the back, but then also the headset here. So those are both controlled by that. And as I say, that was something I wondered if there is a toggle to sort of adjust the headset relatively from one to the other like that. And it doesn't seem to be that is the case, at least at the moment anyway. So let's take a look at the ports that we've got on the back then. And here it is very familiar, as I say, to the Rodecaster Pro 2, really. Only difference is, instead of those 2 combo jacks there that you've got on the back that can take either an XLR cable or a 1/4-inch jack, obviously on the Rodecaster Pro 2, we've got 4 of those. But everything else is pretty much the same, and obviously the headphones as well there. There's just headphones 1 and 2, whereas obviously on the Rodecaster Pro 2, we've got the 3 and 4 as well. It does also still have obviously the speaker output. So if you use speakers, I personally don't use monitors at all in my studio, but there we go. It's still got those, and then it does also still have those USB sockets. And incidentally, those combo jacks, they are, as I say, they can take both the XLR cables, so they can plug in there. But you'll notice the large hole in the middle, which enables you to also plug in a 1/4-inch jack. So if you're going to use an instrument, or even take 2 1/4-inch jacks in and use that as a stereo pair. So as well as just coming in as a mono, as you would get with a microphone, you can actually join 2 separate ports together and make those a stereo pair. Incidentally, I talk about the Rodecaster Duo being, meeting all of my needs in terms of just having 1, maybe 2 microphones. So that's all I ever generally have plugged in. I did actually have something where I was using the 3 USB channels connected to my computer, and I was then getting a 4th channel out of my computer from the headphone output from my computer, and taking that into the other 2 on my Rodecaster Pro 2 ports as a stereo pair. So it basically gave me a different channel for Ecamm Live, 1 for Zoom, maybe 1 for Zoom ISO, and also 1 for Discord. But then I would have a stereo pair coming in from the computer, so that then I effectively had 4 channels going in and out of the computer. I actually don't need to do that anymore because there is I'm using the Stream Deck Plus, so I can control my system audio from that. However, I was interested with these the rotary encoder, because I've only ever generally got 1 set of headphones come in. What I am going to do is I'm going to link up this second dial here on the front, if I can get my shot right. So this is for my headphones. I may just use a MIDI control to actually use that control system audio, and then I can still have it coming in on the same fader as my Ecamm Live, and I'll talk about my setup in a moment. But then I could just use that to adjust literally just adjust my system audio that's being fed out to that. Yeah, that is the overall view of it. The USB sockets that we've got on the back are, again, just the same as on the Rodecaster Pro 2. So we've got power there, and then you've got the SD card that you can, or micro SD that you can record to. Then there is the Ethernet for high-speed firmware updates, and then you've got those two USB sockets. And just as with the Rodecaster Pro 2, the USB 1 actually has two separate channels. So either the main stereo, main multitrack, or the chat channel, and then the second one there is just called Rodecaster, in this case, Rodecaster Duo secondary. So that gives you three USB channels. You could have one plugged into one computer, the second one plugged into a second computer. You could plug it into a separate device, maybe a mobile phone or a iPad or something like that. You can also use these for external storage. If you want to record to an external SSD, you can also use the USBs for that. I personally use these both into my computer, so the same computer that is, and to give me these three separate channels, which I'll walk through in a moment. Let me just check up on some of these comments before I go any further. Use a Heil PR40 mic with a, first of all, sorry, hi Jamie, great to see you here. With a Vocaster 2 interface, what sound or control advantage would I get from moving to one of these? I've not actually used the Vocaster 2 interface. One thing that really sold me on the Rodecaster Pro 2 and also the Rodecaster Duo, and also now the Streamer X, although the Rodecaster Duo is certainly the one that I'm saying is the device for me, as it were. I do love the Streamer X and having the video capability built into it as well. I've done other videos about that one. But for the Rodecaster Duo, what sells it to me is the fact that you've got these multiple USB channels. And usually when you're using an interface to take your XLR into a computer, generally it's just a single USB, and it shows up as a single source. So that is, you might still have an output separately for your monitors, but you're taking an XLR mic in through this device, and then it's showing up on your computer as an input, and that's what a lot of these do. Like the what's it called, the Scarlett and so on. They're all that kind of thing. The thing that really sells me on the Rodecaster Duo and the Rodecaster Pro 2 is this audio routing and the fact that we have got multiple separate USB channels. So it means that you can do things like have multiple mix-minus channels. And I'll get onto what that is in a moment. And it's the audio routing for me is the massively powerful thing. Then again, there is also the things like the smart pads that you can use to apply effects. You can use them to have music on the device itself and play those in. I'm not sure whether the Vocaster 2 does that. I think it's more of just an audio interface. So there is that whole side of stuff with the Rodecaster as well, and it's dealing with multiple inputs. I don't know if the Vocaster 2, if that has is that 2 because it's got 2 mic inputs. So maybe that's the case. But yeah, it's all about the power of the audio routing. And then again, there is the onboard processing. So it's the the preamps and all of that sort of stuff. I don't know personally what the Vocaster Vocaster 2 can do in terms of adding compression, de-essing, noise gates, and all of that kind of stuff. But I'll go into that a little bit later in terms of the capabilities of the Rodecaster Duo. So maybe that will become a little bit more clear. Turn the encoder to 11. I know, well, that's it. With a continuous encoder now, how do we know where 11 is? Oh, no. What are we going to do? Let's just come down here. You could use a white pen to make a line. I know. The trouble is, though, that's the issue is it's not a fixed travel. So this minor thing, which is a non-issue, which I won't spend too much time on. But the dial is not sort of 0 to full like that. It's a continuous thing. So yeah, you wouldn't technically know where that point was. And it also it doesn't correlate exactly. So one turn on minimum to maximum might well be 4 turns of the dial. So anyway, it really is a non-issue. I'm sure it's there because there's some other functionality that it does unlock, maybe if not now, a little bit later. Let me see where we are. Hey, James, great to see you here. Thank you very much. I think a lot of people are going to do that, James, to be honest, because the Rodecaster Pro 2 is amazing. But if you're only using 2 of the sockets, there is something nice about the smaller form factor. And, if you've got the Rodecaster Pro 2, you're not gaining anything necessarily by going to the Rodecaster Duo. It's not like one of these things like, oh, I'm missing out if I don't upgrade. But a lot of people value their desk space, don't they? And having something in a smaller, compact form factor. I also find that with some of the people that I'm talking to, in coaching clients and things like that, sometimes they just feel like the Rodecaster Pro 2 is too much for them because not cost-wise, but in terms of just the capabilities or the size of it on their desk. Because if they're doing virtual presentations into Zoom or something like that, maybe they're using the mic, the USB 1 chat and main to do the eCam and Zoom Teams thing, and they're only using 3 of the faders. Sometimes the Rodecaster Pro 2 may look a little bit like overkill to them, whereas the Rodecaster Duo, as we'll see when I go through my setup of it, is just it's just perfect. I can't describe how much this feels like when a company makes a product that you feel like they've made this for me. it's amazing. Anyway, I won't go too overboard on it. Does the max volume go to 11? Well, there we go. We will never know what it's actually going to. The Rodecaster Pro 2 is that power button. I find a lot more fiddly than the traditional on-off switch. Yeah, to be honest, I get that. There is the power button on the back and the power button on the Rodecaster Duo is the same power button as on the Rodecaster Pro 2. So it's a little button on the back. Maybe I can just show you this. So this is the Oh, by the way, I have mine mounted. The Rodecaster Duo has the VESA mount on the back. So the Rodecaster Pro 2 has both a VESA mount and a 1/4-20 on the back, so that you can mount it either on anything with a VESA mount, just like this. And I'll drop the link to this in the chat. Or you can mount it to a stand with just a 1/4-20 in the middle. The Streamer X has the 1/4-20, but not the VESA mount. Obviously, a VESA mount is bigger than the device, so that would be overkill. But it does have the 1/4-20 in the middle. Interestingly, the Rodecaster Duo only has the VESA mount, so it doesn't have the 1/4-20 single slot in the middle. So I'm not sure quite why that was. It's not something I used. I always would have preferred to use the VESA mount anyway. But that's just something to note if you are, it wouldn't just fit directly on the top of a mic stand, for example. But anyway. Where was I? Oh, yeah, the power switch. So the power switch is this little button on the back. And is it a little bit fiddly? I suppose it could be if you have to press it in rather than just a clunk click sort of switch. The reason I've never really found that to be a particular issue is because mine's never off, actually. I just leave it on my desk. It's just on all the time. So that it's the same with everything in my everything in my studio. I just have it so that I basically just flick the lights on and then I'm ready to record and reduce the friction. But yeah, I know that that's been something that few people have talked about where it's not exactly hard to find though, but yeah, you have to sort of just give it a double click to switch it off and then power off like that. But as I say, it's I've known people have mentioned that before, but not something that I've found. But the processing, as you say, the processing has made editing a lot easier with just some basic post-production as far as audio quality goes. And that comes back to that thing about the difference between this and potentially the Vocaster 2. I'm not sure what sort of onboard processing they've got. And also what is the actual quality of the processing that it can do. Bicky loves overkills, and that is clearly evident by your setup, which I absolutely love. And the nubbins, oh yes, so that will be that's the on-off button that he's referring to there. So first of all, great to see you here. Thanks for stopping by. Lost in Translation podcast. So let's go through then some of the functionality of the Rodecaster Duo. And as I say, if you're familiar with the Rodecaster Pro 2, then none of this is going to come as a particular sort of surprise to you. We've got all of the same onboard processing, but I will just go through and talk about some of it and talk about a couple of the differences as well. So let me try, and I tell you what, I'm going to do a manual zoom here. I should have set up a separate scene for this, but there we go. Let's get the Rodecaster Duo a little bit more front and center. So as I say, the interface looks very familiar. It's exactly the same in terms of the screen here. When it comes to connecting mics and so on, as I say, you've got the Multitrack combo jacks at the back there, so you can bring in a microphone. In terms of the physical faders, what I've used these for is my main thing is audio routing of my audio for Ecamm Live, which is my live production software. That's what I'm using to create this video or this live stream. It's also what I use to create my videos, be it on YouTube or for my courses and so on. But Ecamm Live also goes into Zoom. So I just level up all of my Zoom calls and things like that with, whether it's on Zoom or Teams, online meetings or webinars. I do that all with the Ecamm Live as well, because Ecamm Live has a virtual camera feature that allows you to take it into Zoom so that instead of just being another little box, you can have all of the same audio and video quality that you've got from your live videos, have that going into Zoom. And when you combine that with presentation software like Keynote or PowerPoint, you can combine that all together, and it just gives a much more sort of seamless experience into Zoom. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here, but the point about this is I want to be able to control Ecamm Live, and you've got various different audio components within there. You can play music. You can even bring interview guests in Ecamm Live and then have them come into Zoom. So if you're doing something where you've got like a guest speaker or something, you want to bring them into your production and then take that into Zoom. So you've got Zoom participants. So I use those two simultaneously. So this is my Ecamm Live channel. This is my mic channel. Then I've got my, at the moment, Discord. So Discord is my backstage members are all in there right now. All one of them today, actually, is just Jeff, my timekeeper. Always reminds me to start, otherwise I'll just waffle on. So that is Discord, and then here I've got my Zoom channel. Now, sometimes I'll do events where there is Zoom running for the participants, but then I'll have speakers using Zoom ISO, so that basically runs kind of like a separate instance of Zoom almost, and so I'll have that on this channel. So having these 4 channels, these are the ones that typically I would have used on the Rodecaster Pro 2. These are the ones that I'm sort of actively adjusting, at any given time. Excuse me. And although we'll look into the advanced audio routing later on, where you can send certain channels, into certain other channels or not, as the case may be, I actually do this if I want to just switch something off from the particular channel. I use these buttons down at the bottom, and I'm kind of using them probably not necessarily the way that they are intended. So down at the bottom, you've got the listen button and the mute button. Listen means that you, as the host plugged into the headphone socket 1, or now the headset socket at the front, will hear that particular channel. And then the mute button is to mute that particular channel from the stream, from the mix. Well, what I do is I kind of just listen to all of the channels, and then I actively on the fly sort of mute the ones that I don't want to go into the main mix. So right now you are hearing, I'm hearing all of these obviously, but because I've muted these 2, it means that all you're hearing is anything that comes through Ecamm Live. You're hearing my microphone, but you're not hearing the Discord back channel, and then you're also not hearing this USB 2. So that's how I do that, and I find that is just easier for me then to toggle these on and off, actively, rather than going in and manually adjusting the routing table, which we'll look at a little bit later. But anyway, I digress slightly. So these are the 4 physical faders, and there are then 3 virtual faders. And the way that you access those is by tapping on the rotary encoder over here, and then you've got the same mute and listen buttons there, but then you can just adjust the level of that one. Tap to go to the next, and you can adjust the level of that one up and down, tap again, and then you can get to that 3rd one. You can also, instead of using the rotary encoder, you can just tap on any one of those at any time to get into that. Now, when it comes to what you can add to these, in exactly the same way as on the Rodecaster Pro 2, you can organize what goes where. These aren't fixed like in a lot of other devices, and certainly in the Rodecaster Pro 1, there were dedicated channels on dedicated faders. One of the beauties and one of the things I loved about the Rodecaster Pro 2, or what was introduced with the Rodecaster Pro 2, was the fact that these are all flexible. You can assign whatever you want to each particular channel, or to each particular fader, I should say. So if you click on the settings and you go to faders, here you can see we've got 4 physical faders and we've got 3 virtual faders. And if I want to have the headset, for example, if I want that over here, I just drag and drop it. You can just rearrange these however it makes sense. And that's really great. If you are, on the Rodecaster Pro 1, for example, the first 4 faders were for mics. Well, if you've only got 1 in, then it made those, second, the other 3 kind of redundant. Whereas this does allow you to be flexible and add what you want where. One difference, though, with the Rodecaster Duo versus the Rodecaster Pro 2, and this is just something to be aware of, is although we have these different inputs, so we've got the mic input 1 and 2, we've also got the USB 1, 2, and 3, technically, or the main chat, the chat, and the secondary. We've got the smart pads, as we had before, and the Bluetooth, and then now we've got this additional one of the headset. But what actually is going on here is we've technically got 8 potential things that you might want to add to a fader, but there are only 7 faders. So I don't necessarily think that that's an issue for me. Well, it isn't an issue for me, but it's just something to be aware of. If I tap on any one of these faders, you can see that there are 8 to choose from, but there are only 7 slots. So you've got input 1, input 2, headset, Bluetooth, USB 1, and the 2, as I've said, and the sound pads there. So I did wonder why they didn't make it so that we've maybe, instead of, got 4 physical and 4 virtual, it may be just down to the space available on the screen, because although the screen is exactly the same size in terms of the Rodecaster Pro 2, we've got these buttons down the side which indicate what is on the smart pads. And if you look at the Rodecaster Pro 2, these are taking up less sort of horizontal space because there are 8 of the buttons, and because they're square, they're smaller. they're displayed smaller on the screen because obviously there are fewer of them. If I can just bring this over so that you can see. Are we going to get these all in? Let's try. There we go. So those are the difference in the buttons. So because you've got a stack of 4 here instead of a stack of 3, it means that because they're square, they're taking up less space that way. So it means you've got less horizontal space than to potentially put in the faders. I did wonder, though, if they could potentially have an additional one so that you've got 4 things, or it may be down to just the way that the firmware is, the software that's actually running it, if that is a limitation of that in terms of there are only physically 3 virtual things programmed into it, if that makes sense. But anyway, I don't think that this is it's certainly not an issue for me, because I will be just deciding which one of these which ones I want to have on there. I've got the headset on there at the moment so that I can just sort of show it that this is a second fader, an additional fader. You've got the microphone 1, the microphone 2. Let's go back to this view. In fact, you've got let's go into here, in fact. So microphone 1, microphone 2, or I should say input 1, input 2. You've still got that option to combine those 2. If you had a stereo pair coming in, then you just simply click on, I won't do it right now because I'm using it, but if you were to click on that stereo button, it would basically link those 2 together and then assign them to a single fader, so that you've got one fader controlling a stereo pair coming in. But then you do have the headset there. So I've kind of activated that to just show that there is literally a 3rd channel for the headset. And then obviously we've got these other ones. So likely I won't probably be using a headset, so it's not an issue. I will ultimately have the Bluetooth back on that slot, and then I'll have input 1 and 2 for 2 microphones. Now, in addition to the XLR mics that we can use, you can pair this with the Rode Wireless Me or the Rode Wireless Go 2 as well. One thing to note about that is, whilst the headset can be used in addition to these 2 ports, the way the wireless mic works is it's basically taking one of these channels. So you can't essentially have like 2 XLR mics coming in at the moment, can't have 2 XLR mics coming in and then also have a wireless mic, because if I go into the mic settings, so if I just come out of this and just tap on this microphone here, so this is mic 2, and you're essentially choosing what kind of mic. So if it was something plugged into the back, you could have an instrument plugged in, you could have a line in, or you could have one of these presets for the range of of mics from Rode. They've also obviously got the Shure SM7B as they had on the Rodecaster Pro 2. But you can from here choose the Rode wireless mic, and so when you do that, there is just a button here to pair the device, and you can pair it with the Rode wireless. But it's just to note that if you're pairing a wireless device, then you are essentially sort of it's in place of one of those jacks on the back, or one of those Neutrik combo jacks sockets on the back. That's perfect for me. What I'll be doing with this is I'll be using the wired mic, and then I'll also use the wireless mic more for some of the Amazon stuff, which I'll be getting back into, where I don't want to have a big microphone in front. So yeah, and then there's obviously, as I say, the headset input. So that is the inputs and the things that you can add to the faders. I'll just go through some of the audio routing and specifically why this is a great device if you are using it for things like your Zoom calls, and if you're using especially, if I can get my words out, if you're using something like Ecamm Live or maybe OBS to add something to your presentations, and you want to route all your audio through this, or you're doing a live stream with a backstage and you want to have that level of control over it. Then it's in here. So if I go to outputs, and then we've got this routing section in here. And here, what you can do is you can control what's going to go where. So if I look at the USB 1, this is the key thing for me, is just making sure that mix minus is on. And just to clarify again what mix minus is, the Rodecaster Duo or the Pro or even the Streamer X, they're essentially acting as audio hubs, really. It's not just an input device, it's an audio hub. So you're getting all of the audio coming in through various different channels, and then it's going out through certain channels. Now, some channels are just purely input, like the mic channel obviously is just an input channel. Some are just purely outputs, so namely the headphones, and some are both input and output channels, like the USB and the Bluetooth. And that means that audio can come down that particular line, but it can go back out that particular route as well. And what that can do is, if you are on a Zoom call, for example, then your participants will be speaking, the audio from them will be coming into your Rodecaster, and you will hear it, but then their audio will go straight back out to them again, and then they'll hear themselves back. And this is known as slapback, more commonly echo, or less accurately, but more commonly echo. And so they will be saying, your participants would say, we can hear echo. Whereas the point about this is you wouldn't be able to hear it. You wouldn't hear what they're hearing because you're just hearing them once, because it comes into your ears and then that's it. But they're hearing this kind of return feed. So mix minus removes anything that's coming in from that channel from the return feed back through that channel. So anything coming from the input of that channel is not going to be sent back to the output. And that eliminates this thing of slapback. It would be exactly the same in Ecamm if you were doing an interview, for example, and you were using Ecamm Live's interview mode. The audio from the interview guest is coming into Ecamm. It's then coming into the Rodecaster, and you're hearing it, and it's going into the mix. But it's also feeding back into Ecamm as well. And that would be captured in the recording. So you need to have mix minus on for that. And then again, same with the Discord back channel that I've got going on here. So I just have mix minus on all of those. And actually, generally, I would say that it's almost better to just have it on, because I haven't really found any instance where having it on will negatively affect something. It's one of those things that if you've got it on, then you'll be glad that it's on, and if you haven't, then you'll pay the price in terms of quality somewhere along the line. So I just do toggle that one on for all of those channels. Same with Bluetooth, by the way. There are two ways that you can use the Rodecaster over Bluetooth. You can either use it to just basically pair it with a set of Bluetooth speakers, and so the speakers then become the monitors, as well as obviously having the speaker output in the back. So you've got wired speaker output just there to left and right, but you can just pair this with a set of Bluetooth speakers and use that for your external monitoring. But the other way of using Bluetooth, and probably the more common and intended purpose of this, is to actually just pair it with your mobile device, phone or tablet or whatever, and then it basically becomes like a Bluetooth headset almost, albeit the mother of all Bluetooth headsets. And it means that you're going to get the audio from anyone who's calling in. Like if you've got a call-in show, I was talking to someone just 2 days ago who has people calling in to a show that they do. So they could call in on the phone, but this then is capturing the audio from the mobile, but then also you're sending all of your high quality audio from the Rodecaster back over Bluetooth, and that's what they're hearing on their end. The other thing about doing that, by the way, is all of the processing that we'll look at later, you can apply that to all of the channels. So it means that you can potentially be tweaking the audio of your guests, albeit there is a little bit more that goes into tweaking guest audio, or sorry, any of the audio things in terms of the onboard processing, and it's not something necessarily that would be a global sort of catch-all setting, but you could have something that is an initial setting that would help clear up a number of things, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So that is the mix minus option in any case. But what they added in a relatively recent firmware update, or maybe it wasn't these now, I can't remember. But anyway, they added this custom routing. And what that allows you to do is choose for every one of these channels. If I just go back out of here a minute, here are the different channels. We've got the headphone 1 and 2. We've got and by the way, the headphone 1 is also, as I say, the headset at the front. So it's going to be the same for both of those. Whether that will get split out at some point in the future, I'm not sure, into, potentially having the headset to be used independently of the channel 1 there. I'm not sure. The headphone 1, I'm not sure. But headphones 1 and 2. Then you've got the monitors. So that would be the speakers on the back there, I was going to say, I guess, the Bluetooth, but the Bluetooth is covered down here. So forget that. That is the monitors on the back there. Then you've got the recording, because obviously this is a recording device as well. I don't actually use it that much for recording. I do record I do capture the audio from my podcast on it, although I, record my podcast in Ecamm Live, but then I only really extract my track out from that because Ecamm is capturing the audio from my guest in interview mode. So I don't use this, as the original intention of the Rodecaster Pro 2, for an actual hardware recording device. It has got some great capabilities there. So nevertheless, you can decide what goes into your recording. So just as I'm excluding Discord right now from this, you could be recording a live podcast with a Discord backstage area for people to ask questions and things, and that not go through into the recording. Then we've got Bluetooth, USB 1, USB chat, and the USB 2. So just going back into the Bluetooth then, as well as just either having the main mix or the mix minus, as I've already talked about, there is this custom mix here. And this shows you all of the different channels that are coming in. And then this is choosing what is going specifically out to that Bluetooth channel. So if, as I say, I want to just exclude the Discord from that particular channel, I can just come in here and tap on that and just turn it down. So now you can see I've turned down the Discord, so that's not going through into the Bluetooth mix. If you are doing this kind of routing, you would also want to make sure you're excluding the original in there. Although actually it looks like, let me just have a double check of this. See if it's in there. So yeah, with the Bluetooth, or with one of the, let me come back to this one. We'll come to this one. I'll try that again. With this custom mix, if you want to have mix minus, you basically just have to make sure that whatever channel you're in, so at the moment I'm on the USB 2 channel now, I would just need to make sure that I actually reduce the USB 2 from that. So that's simulating mix minus effectively. It's removing USB 2 from that USB 2 channel. Now, at the moment, what happens is when I adjust the fader for this USB 2 channel, you'll see how it is also moving the relative level here. So this little green bar is what is, it's maybe a little bit tricky to see. This little lower bar here is what I've set the level to going down to this specific channel. But then because I can adjust the sort of global level here, it is also adjusting that one. You can detach that completely by pressing that button here. So it's got this little link icon. And so that I've just seen Doc's comment. You can adjust that separately. So now when I adjust the fader, this one is fixed. You can also just actually turn off that channel altogether. So actually that's probably a more accurate view of mix minus. Just toggle it off altogether. So that's the point there, is you can control custom mixes to each individual channel, and they can either be still attached to the fader. So you might want to just bring the volume down potentially on a particular channel, but still have it that if in the main mix you are moving this up and down, it is still also adjusting the mix in there as well. Or you can have it just, so it's completely detached. One thing that to be aware of with that, and one reason why I don't tend to use this so much, and why I prefer just to sort of manually do these things, is you would have to be a little bit conscious of where all these levels are set. So if you're setting individual levels to each individual channel, Just note that what you're seeing on the fader here is just the sort of the master, if you like. And it could be that if you've set the volume relatively on a channel lower, then you might move this down thinking that there is still some volume there. But in actual fact, on that other channel, it is already down to 0. So yeah, I don't know how you would ever get around that, whether it could show like a a maximum and minimum on these faders. That may well just get confusing. But yeah, just to be aware that if you do go and change settings within here for the outputs and for the routing, and to answer your question, Doc, what is the difference between routing and routing? Routing is what we say in the UK, and routing is what probably the rest of the world says. But yeah, routing or routing. So yeah, that is the power of this for me, though, is the fact that I can have these 3 mix minus channels, but then also have the system audio and everything like that coming in. At the moment, I'm doing that with the same channel as Ecamm, because Ecamm can handle system audio, so I can have it so that if I'm doing anything in Ecamm that requires system audio, it is capturing that there. But as I say, I'm going to go through the process of setting up this using MIDI to actually control that as well, to give me that extra level. A few other things. Let me just go through these settings just to sort of cover off what is going on in there. We've got the faders there, so I've already covered off that one. The outputs is where you're going to change the routing or routing. A few things with the monitor. If you are using the external speakers, what it will do is if you have got your mic sort of live, so if your mic volume is up, then it's going to do this by default, auto mute the monitor output. So if you've got speakers plugged in and then you're on a Zoom call and you're wondering why you can't hear yourself, it's likely this setting, which is that if your mic's live, it's not going to come through, because what you don't want in a quality audio device is the audio from your speakers feeding back into your mic. It's also got the same for Bluetooth. So if you have got a Bluetooth output as well, I mentioned that you can use Bluetooth as speakers, then you can add that there as well. And then fixed output level will just set the output to line level. So that's if you want to take this out into something else, then rather than having this dial. So let me just come out to the front. I've talked about this rotary encoder, and if you select one of these, it's for adjusting the level on this. But if you haven't got one of those selected, it's actually for adjusting the monitor level, and that is indicated here. So this little dial at the top, that indicates the level of the monitors, the audio, the speakers that you can plug into the back, and you can see it's turning around there from maximum to minimum. But at the moment, it's got a little cross through the middle of it, and that's because there's nothing plugged into it, first of all, but my mic is live. So if I was to move that down, then if my mic went down to 0, I've probably got another mic up here somewhere, but if any mics in the room were down to 0, then that would turn to green, I think, to adjust that level. Anyway, so that is the output for the monitor. You've also got the headphones. You can choose the type of headphones, whether they're in-ear monitors like this or high sensitivity headphones like this, rather, or something like the RØDE NTH100, so a different type of headphone there. Just still continuing through here, the listen button. Now, I mentioned before about how I use these listen buttons where I'm just listening to everything. There are a couple of options here. So you can either have this pre-fader or post-fader. So after fader means when you are using this listen, it is actually applying this, whatever you've got on the fader here to what you're hearing. You can also set that to pre-fader, which means that it would just come through at unity, i.e. whatever's coming in is what is going to go out to you. So that's what the pre-fader is in there. Multitrack. This is for if you when you are recording. Obviously, we've got multiple different channels here. So when you are actually recording or USB, I'll come to that. If you are recording, you can choose whether you want to have it off. In which case, when you hit the record button on the Rodecaster, you're just going to get a single track of all of these different. A single file of all of these different tracks together. So you're just getting the combined thing of the final production, essentially. However, you can also record pre-fader and post-fader. Now, if you record pre-fader, that is going to record all of the audio tracks exactly as they come in without any of the adjustments that you've made. So if you're going to take all of this audio and you're going to do post-processing and take it into a separate app that you're going to use to apply different processing and things like that, then likely you would want the pre-fader, and then you've got all of the initial sort of raw tracks to work with. You can also toggle on here bypass processing. So this pre-fader is going to basically bypass the fade level, so the volumes that you've got them all adjusted to. But you can also use this bypass processing to also exclude anything like the the noise gate, the compressor, and all that kind of stuff, which we'll look at in a while as well. So you can exclude all of those, so that literally you do just get the raw signals and multiple different tracks of all of those different things. Or if you want to have the tracks with the levels all set as you've got them set to, and bypassing and with the processing, then you would just select post fader, and so then that would just come in at those. Likely, pre-fader is going to be most common. If you are recording multiple tracks, you will still also get a single track that has got everything applied and a final output as well. But likely pre-fader is the most common one that you'd want to use there. Depending on what you're going to do, I would say that even if you want to sort of restructure the podcast or whatever it is you're recording after the fact, in some other software, probably leaving the processing on is what most people would do, just because the onboard processing is so great on here that you would want to set it on here and then not have to go through that whole process again on something else. But anyway, you've also then got the same kind of thing for the USB. So the Rodecaster has the ability to send multiple tracks to the computer, so that if you are using some sort of software like Adobe Audition or something like that, you can have it so that it is feeding in all of the individual tracks to that software. And so if that's the case, then you would want to have either pre-fader or post-fader, just as we've talked about in the last one with the recording. You can do the same thing for what's being passed over USB. Pre-fader is just going to send in all of those raw signals from the different channels that you've got, and then the post-fader obviously is going to have that those different levels assigned to them that you've assigned on the mixer itself. For the vast majority of people, though, using this, you'd want to make sure that that is actually off. And in the Rodecaster Pro 2, I think the default was it had got the multi-track selected on one of these, whereas I noted that on the Rodecaster Duo, when it was switched on out of the box sort of thing, then the multi-track was off, which actually makes more sense, because the majority of people, you're probably not using the multi-track feature. You're likely to be wanting to just take the audio from the Rodecaster into Zoom, into Ecamm, into your content creation software or whatever it is, and so there, having the multi-track off is useful. I think people who are more audio pros in terms of using the software and some sort of DAW, a digital audio workstation, for example, they will obviously be more loath to go in and do this. But I think that a lot of just general consumers wouldn't necessarily know if this was on by default, and it can actually cause issues if you have got a piece of software that's looking for a stereo input and then it is actually getting these multiple tracks. It can cause some confusion with certain pieces of software that are just not built to accept that. So a long way of saying, if you're just using this as the way that I'm talking about here, then just double check that the USB is off. And you can actually see this because in your computer, when you've got your USB 1 cable connected out of the back here, you'll see that there are two channels. There is the USB of the Rodecaster Duo main and Rodecaster Duo chat, but actually you'll see in brackets it says after Rodecaster Duo main it'll have in brackets stereo, whereas if this is set to one of these it will have multi-track after it. So that's how you kind of know that you're in the right setting there. Just coming back out of this then, there is also processing. I'll talk about processing a little bit later, but this processing is actually for the overall mix. So you have what's called the master compeller that is adding, essentially it's kind of like a compressor really, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but this is adding it to the whole mix. So what you're adjusting here is adding something to the whole mix. You've also got an output delay here, so you can delay the audio going out to your live streaming or video capturing software. So that is on the outputs. I will just go into this quickly as well. The brightness, obviously, that is the brightness of these buttons, and you can adjust the brightness of like how bright they are when they're on versus when they are off. Nothing much more to say about that. The metering you may be interested in. The default here, if I go to default metering, which is obviously the default, what you'll see is when you look at the the screen here, you can see that there's no physical numbers on here. It just shows you the sort of position of those faders. Whereas if you go back into here, display and metering, you can choose this to be broadcast metering. And what that's going to display then is it's got the dBFS, decibel full scale actually on here. So you can see the physical numbers, and it gives you a slightly higher number of sort of marks on there to sort of see the grading of exactly where you are on that scale. So I prefer that one. I do explain all about the dBFS decibel full scale in the Rodecaster Pro 2 masterclass, which needs to be renamed now because really it also encompasses the Rodecaster Duo. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but all the same stuff is covered in this course in terms of in terms of just the, the functionality and how to use it. It's essentially a mini Rodecaster Pro 2. I did wonder why they dropped the Pro from the name of this actually. I mean, it could also have been, it's probably just because of the length of it. It could really have been the Rodecaster Pro Mini or Rodecaster Pro Duo. I know it would become a bit of a mouthful, but it really is the same level of pro device in my mind, just for people who don't need 4 mics. So don't be fooled by the fact that this doesn't have the word Pro in it. It's almost the Rodecaster Pro Mini, but yeah, it wouldn't really fit in that space, would it? Anyway, let's just go back to some of these. I will just go through the final few things in here. You have got haptics, so you can have it so that when you tap on the thing, you get a haptic feedback. It's got like a little thing that will vibrate in there. The default, I think, is haptic feedback always on. So as you're tapping, you're kind of like feeling the taps underneath you. There is haptic feedback on hold, so that might be, if you don't want to have it all the time, but just when you need to do something where you press and hold, for example, then you can have that. I personally just have the haptic feedback off on the screen. Incidentally, the screen is gorgeous. It's the same one as we got on the Rodecaster Pro 2. I think we've become accustomed to, high quality screens, on our phones and so on. But it's amazing how many consumer devices you get that have got some sort of screen in it, and the screen is still terrible. So, yeah, nice to see a high quality screen in there. The show, now this is the thing that I mentioned about, I think I called it a show profile, but they're just called shows, I think. But this is where you can create, if you've got a different setup with different routing. So maybe you're using this for your podcast, but you also use it for your Zoom calls, for your creating your videos. Obviously, we've got this organization here that we can put whatever channels we want where. Well, you can create multiple different versions of this. So you could have your podcast setup that's got 2 mics, your sound pads, and so on. Then you might have another one that is for your Zoom calls that's got, like I've got the 3 USB channels and your mic. There might be another use case you've got for it. So you can create multiple different things, and those are all in your shows. I've just got one because I tend to just do this. The single setup works fine for me for all that I'm doing, but you can just come in here and create a new show and then go ahead and do all the setup as you want. And by the way, adjusting, mic setups and all of that kind of stuff as well. And then you can come in here and switch between them. This is also where you manage the recordings, although you can get to that from the front screen. So that is the show. And then within the system, you've got things like attaching to your network, the Bluetooth setup. Now, when you are setting up for a Bluetooth device, if you want to pair a set of Bluetooth speakers, you'll come into Bluetooth and you'll click on this, search for audio devices. But if you want to pair it with your phone to be, a phone or iPad or whatever it is, and you want it to be a Bluetooth, essentially this mother of all Bluetooth headsets, then you don't actually press this button. You want to go into your device itself, and then you'll search in there. So I think some people come into the Bluetooth thinking that, oh, I want to search for my phone in here, but just know that that's for pairing with speakers. Instead, go into your phone and do the search in there, and then you'll see that it shows up as Rodecaster Duo. So that's those 2 different ways I mentioned of using the Bluetooth. Then you've got date and time, obviously, that you can set, language. And then in information, you're going to see device information is going to show you your serial number and so on. Check for updates. And then there's also analytics here where you can choose to share your usage statistics, anonymous. I mean, you're not putting personal data on here. It's just showing how you're using it. And then the resource statistics share resource usage and processor utilization reports. So I would always share these things. I mean, we want to make these devices better. You're not storing, you can't store credit card information on here, so you're not sharing anything personal. And it's just all going to help then with presumably they'll be analyzing this to make it better. And then there is the check for updates button there as well. So that is the overall settings. We'll just run through some of the onboard processing. Let's come back to the questions, though. I'll just see if I've missed anything because I have been rattling on for quite some time. Where are we? Just received mine today. A bit disappointed by the lack of virtual output. You only have 2. I would like to separate software to dedicated channel with dedicated faders, chat, music, browser, games. Yeah, so there is the 3 USB channels, but it doesn't have like onboard. It doesn't have a separate software to then split that further on the computer. You're right. There is other software you can do with that. Incidentally, I am testing at the moment the beta of the Rhode's Unify software to use with the Streamer X. I'm liking what I'm seeing so far with that, but I'll make a separate video all about that because that is specifically for the Streamer X. But the thought did come to me I wonder if this is something that could at some point. At the moment, it works with the Streamer X that could just work with the Rodecaster Pro 2, or at least it can be used to control the Streamer X as well. But technically, now I'm even just talking. Technically, the Rode Unify software. I'll have to get back to you on this. Technically, the Rode Unify software, because you could take an input from the Rodecaster Pro 2, then you could apply. Yeah, you could probably use Unify. So, which up until now has been PC only, but the beta of it, I've got a copy of that, and literally just yesterday, and I've obviously first thing I did, install it, dive into it. So, yeah, that's looking really really great. So probably that we'll be able to use with this. I was only really testing it with Streamer X, but I'll get back to you on that, but yeah, probably Unify will be the way that you can do that. So then you've got an extra level on the computer itself. But as it is, you've got 3 USB channels that you can assign to different things, but you've got 4 there. So obviously there's only 3. Thank you. The pod mic is sounding nice. Always found original a bit harsh and top mid heavy. Custom preset or pod mic preset on the Duo. I'll go through that actually. The preset is the pod mic, but then I've gone through and made some adjustments as well. And that's the beauty of the Rodecaster Pro 2 and Rodecaster Duo and the Streamer X is that onboard processing. So you can really sort of tweak it. Hey Parker, great to see you here. Slapback sounds like it should be a metal band. Great. Oh, that's great, Doc. It is. I know you've been busy traveling as well, so and the island folks are always. It takes a while to get through to Hawaii. I think I've covered the difference between routing and routing. They may have multiple reasons, multiple definitions as well. The custom routing was a great update. Ability to mute, unmute sounds and use multi-inputs and then include in the recording offered awesome additions to podcasting. Yeah, so that advanced audio routing, which as I say was a later update to be able to specifically choose what's going exactly and at what level to which is great. That's sorry. I've just got a voice from the background there. A router is indeed for woodwork. So that is the one place where the same spelling in the UK we use router, which is for milling out wood. But anyway, and also. The router, as in a network router, we call those routers as opposed to routers in the UK generally. Anyway, this is very much pause and puts. Hello, great to see you here. I love how Rode streamlined Rodecaster Pro 2. That really is what it feels like. I mean, obviously, if you need four mic inputs, then the Rodecaster Pro 2 all the way. But that is exactly what it feels like to me. It feels like it's been streamlined. And as I said at the beginning, it feels like they've streamlined it for me for exactly what I would use it for. But yeah, that is exactly what they've done. Question from Jamie. Using Ecamm interview feature, I regularly produce a show with both a remote interviewer and a remote guest. Will I have audio processing control of them both on the Duo? You produce a show with a remote interviewer and a remote guest. If they're coming in as a on Ecamm and they're coming in over Ecamm Live and therefore they're coming into Ecamm Live as a both into Ecamm. Ecamm is then feeding into the Rodecaster as a single channel. Ecamm at the moment doesn't give you the option to split that out into multi-track outputs. I know that is a feature request that people have often asked for Ecamm to be able to give give you a multi-track output essentially, but at the moment you don't. So what that means is that those two guests are coming in as Ecamm, and then they're coming in as one into the Rodecaster. So you could apply some sort of adjustment to that. One thing that you may want to do is like a noise gate, for example. You could apply that, although just be careful of that if you've got other audio coming through Ecamm. But if you've only got the guests and they've got some background noise or whatever that's coming in, you could technically apply something like that. But yeah, if you've got multiple guests in Ecamm, then any processing you apply will apply to all of those. So not necessarily ideal for that particular use case. Yes. Hey, Danny, great to see you again. Let me have a look. Yes, reading the manual, it's a lot quicker. To be honest, Doc, I mean, the thing is, it's exactly the same as the Rodecaster Pro 2. So, yeah. And by the way, that thing about manual reading, the first thing I do when I'm planning a course is just read the manual of the device, and that usually gives you a pretty good framework of the course. Let me see where we're up to. I noticed you mentioned compatibility with Wireless Go 2. Is that because it's not compatible with the Wireless Go? Yeah, as I understand it, the Wireless Go, the original Wireless Go is not compatible. It requires, they made some change in terms of, I don't know, the receiver, the transmitter, the technology. I'm not sure exactly. But as I understand it, it is compatible with the Rode Wireless Go 2 and the new Rode Wireless Me as well. And incidentally, the difference between the Rode Wireless Me and the Rode Wireless Go is, apart from the Rode Wireless Go 2 being slightly more expensive, I forget how much the price of them is now, but that has onboard recording, whereas the Rode Wireless Me doesn't have the onboard recording. Although, by all accounts, they've I guess streamlined is the word, or automated some of the onboard processing. So I think that the Rode Wireless Me is better for people who are just going to take it out and they don't need to do any tweaking. And as I say, it doesn't have that onboard recording. But certainly for a studio use case, then the recording is is going to be recording on the device anyway. But yeah, I don't think it works with the Rode Wireless Go original Rode Wireless Go. What in-ear monitors do you use? I use KZS10 in-ear monitors, or ZS10. There's another UK-US thing. ZS. I'll find the link for you. There you go, top of the search list there. And yeah, I think they're about $50 or something like that. And they are perfect. They're not as good as the Rode NTH 100s, which are over-the-ear headphones. I just never like the look on a live stream. This is what I use when I'm actually listening to stuff on my computer, but not when I'm streaming or on Zoom meetings. People shouldn't ever wear headsets on Zoom meetings. It just looks so weird to be on a call with somebody and they got their headset on. I guess in an office environment, then it's maybe that's the use case for them, but I'll just drop these in. So KZS10, KZS10 Pro monitors, and they've been great. I've had these for I guess just over 2 years now, and yeah, really good quality, good price. I did look at some of the Shores and things like that, and yeah, I think for what I'm doing, they're more than adequate. You can go to ridiculous extremes with headphones, as you probably know. Ernesto, what about the hiss? First of all, hello, thanks for being here. What about the hiss? If you're talking about the hiss on this mic right now, it may actually be my aircon, and I've got the noise gate set, and I'll talk about the audio processing. I've got the audio noise gate set so that when I stop talking, it goes completely quiet. And part of the reason for that is when I'm on Zoom calls or I'm in Discord or things like that, if I don't speak, I don't want to be sort of manually muting all the time, but I want it to be that when I stop speaking, it is deadly silent so that then, people are not hearing background noise or me tapping on the keyboard or anything like that. But there is actually an aircon unit going up here, and that is introducing a hiss into this mic. The hiss of the thing. I'll show you that in a moment. I'll go through the audio processing settings in very brief detail because I did cover the audio processing in a previous live stream, which I'll link to afterwards as well. So yeah, I don't know if that's what you're talking about. In terms of if I've just got if I've got my mic down, I'm not hearing anything. the preamps on it are amazing. So it's this high gain, low noise preamps. So if you've got something like a Shure SM7B, which typically, unless you're Doc with a big booming voice, typically the SM7B will require something like a cloud lifter or something to sort of boost the signal. In actual fact, if you use one of those in line with the Rodecaster Duo or the Pro 2 or the RØDE Streamer X, it will actually introduce more noise because they've got these low noise preamps that are actually better to add that gain than using a booster. So certainly you don't need a cloud lifter or a FET head if you're using one of those dynamic mics that normally requires it. In terms of the headphones, though, when I've got the headphones in, I'm not hearing anything in terms of the headphone output. So I don't know if that has been an issue for you or others, but I certainly haven't experienced it. And that might be down to the fact that, I don't claim to be an absolute audio expert in any stretch. And I'm exaggerating by there because I'm not even close to what a lot of people are. But it just feels fine to me. Danny Brown, it'd be nice if RØDE released a firmware update for headphones like mic defaults. So industry stalwarts like, that would be interesting. Yeah, at the moment they do have the difference between like the high sensitivity, these kind of things versus the over the ear, and there is a setting specifically for these ones. In fact, so as well as like just over the ear cans, there is one setting that is just for this mic, just for this set of headphones. But then when you look at the mic settings, so if I maybe show rather than just tell you about this, if I come into the settings and I tap on any one of these mics, mic inputs, maybe I'll just choose not the active mic right now. I'll choose this one. You've got these sort of presets for different mics. Now, they are presets for generally RØDE mics. So as well as the line in, the instrument, the dynamic mic, the condenser mic there. So if you've just got any kind of mic, you can use those. But then they've got presets for the pod mic. Obviously, there's the wireless mic that I mentioned. The RØDE Broadcaster, the Procaster, the NT1, NT1A, and so on. So they've got all of their mics in there, and then they do have one preset for the Shure SM7B. So, Danny, I guess what you're talking about is for the headphones, in the same way that we can adjust either the high sensitivity or the cans or the NTH100 to have, profiles, I guess, for specific headphone outputs. So, don't know whether that's something that is being considered or not, but yeah, I get what you're saying there. Let me just keep coming down these comments. The metering option is indeed nice. Yes, it's good to see that. Just call it the Rodecaster Masterclass. Yeah, well, so what he's talking about here. Maybe I'll use this as a cheeky segue. So we're going to talk about the audio routing we've already talked about, and the audio processing. And one of the things I found when I got the Rodecaster Pro 2 and speaking to people is I felt like it's really such an accessible device, be it the Rodecaster, the Streamer X, or the Duo here. They're really accessible, and they are, consumer devices. But at the same time, they're kind of like pro audio devices, really, aren't they? And so I think a lot of people get them, but don't really understand how to do things like, the audio routing is one aspect, but then there is all of this onboard processing, which we'll look at. And that's why I created the Rodecaster Pro 2 Masterclass, which really now needs to be changed to RØDE Audio Device Masterclass, because it does actually cover not just the Rodecaster Pro 2, but it also covers the Rodecaster Duo, really. I will make some specific new videos to this to, specifically about a couple of differences between the Duo and the Rodecaster Pro 2. But it also really applies to the Streamer X, because the main reason that I created this, as well as covering, getting started guide, so each of these sections, how to connect up your device, audio routing, I talk about mic technique, using the smart pads, and each of these are sections, so you can dive into each of these sections. But it was these ones really that were my reasoning for making this. So the foundations of dynamic audio processing, because that is really, the power. And coming back to this question that there was earlier about, what's the difference between the Rodecaster Duo versus, one of these other devices that allow you to plug in an XLR mic and take it into your computer over USB. This is really, for me, I see it as, one of the main benefits is all of this dynamic onboard processing that you've got. But what even is that? And so there's a module all about that. So talking about, the basics of sound, understanding amplitude and frequency, measuring amplitude, enabling broadcast meeting, which we've just talked about, measuring frequency and understanding dynamic processes, and what is Aphex audio processing. So that's kind of like an introduction to what all of these onboard processors are doing. But then for each one, I've dived into going into a lot more detail, because when you start looking at the onboard processing, and this module alone here, there's 10 there, there's another 3 pages. So there's about 30 lessons that are all about just actually, optimizing your sound. And Danny mentioned earlier about the pod mic, sounding good, and thank you very much for for mentioning this on the Rodecaster Duo and the pod mic together. Well, that's really also down to the audio settings, and so that's all sort of dialed in using this. So you can get a link to the Rodecaster Pro 2 Masterclass, soon to be renamed. And I'm in a bit of a quandary about what to call it, because I could call it the Rodecaster Masterclass, and in fact the link is just rodecastermasterclass.com. And then, as I say, it will cover the Rodecaster Pro 2 and the Duo. But I am going to be adding some content into that, specifically about the Streamer X as well, because it's all really under the same umbrella. We've got all of the same onboard processing with the Streamer X as we have with the Rodecaster Duo, in terms of the noise gate, the de-esser, and all of that kind of stuff. So we'll take a look in that. But yeah, well, I'll have to figure out the new name for it, but it will apply to everything that we're talking about here. Anyway, that little bit of self-promotion out of the way. Let's get back to the questions. And let me see where I am up to with this. 5 years of RCP and RCP2 shows in the Duo. They are listening. It certainly does, doesn't it? I mean, it's like evolving to the requirements and the needs of the users. And the Rodecaster Pro 2, by the way, it's not like, oh, there's a it's not like this is replacing it. The Rodecaster Pro 2 has still very much got a firm place in the market for people who want those multiple inputs. If you're doing an in-person podcast with 4 guests, or you've got multiple different inputs, or maybe you've got multiple guitars and instruments or stereo pairs, there's still certainly a very good place for it in there. But yeah. Yeah, so you had the same thought regarding Unify and Rodecaster Pro 2. Yeah, it's funny because it's talked about Unify being for the, as another app that you can use with the Streamer X. But just thinking about the inputs and outputs, I surely can just select the thing. Anyway, I digress. I'm glad we're on the same page with that, though. The Unify beta, yeah, it's looking great, isn't it? Thanks to Unify, is a 6 to 8 channel interface. Yeah, so it gives us those extra channels. Of course you do, Doc. So yeah, where's the Rodecaster, the full mixing desk as well? We could get that. But a Rodecaster Pro, a Rodecaster Pro with 8 channels for gigs. Most of the mixes make me mad after working on the Rodecaster Pro too. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like a consumer device, but at the same time it's a pro device, isn't it? Really, as it says in the name. Oh, good. I'm glad we've got some more behind the Z movement. Use the ear cans all the time. Is that the Rode ones? Yeah, I really do like the Rode NTH 100. As I say, I use them all the time when I'm for listening and stuff like that, because they are much higher quality than certainly these ones. And I much prefer that kind of thing. A bit more comfortable as well than wearing these ones all the time. That's a link to Rode Advanced Audio Setting Stream. Oh, is that my is that my one? Oh, thank you very much, Doc. Best audio setup for Rodecaster Pro 2. So there we go. That's probably Doc's link. Given that Rich just said cheeky. Let's have a little look. Let's have a little look. That's my other thing that Rich keeps pointing out. Let's take a large look. As a customer of this course, these advanced courses are worth the price alone. Thank you very much. The check is in the post. Danny has taken the Rodecaster Pro 2 Masterclass, and I really appreciate you saying that, though. Thanks, Danny. Captivate Masterclass about templates. I still haven't got into Captivate. I'm digressing here. I'm still using Kajabi to host my thing just because that's where everything else is. But Captivate is the way forward. RC Masterclass, Rodecaster Masterclass, yeah. Let's see where we are. Do you think the pricing is right between the X, the Duo, and the Pro 2? I was hoping for a bit more of a discount on the lower tier models. That is a really interesting question, and I do have a few thoughts on that. So what about the pricing of the Rodecaster Pro 2 versus the Duo versus the Streamer X? Let me just double check the exact pricing before I go off on something about this, because the Rodecaster Pro 2, I'm just going to pull it up now so I get this right. The Rodecaster Pro 2, as it stands, is essentially $700. The Rodecaster Duo is for essentially $500. Let's ignore the dot one. So the Rodecaster Pro 2 is $700, and the Rodecaster Duo is $500. Just double checking that. Yeah, so $700 versus $500. So I think that's amazing that the Rodecaster Duo is actually $200 less, given that all you're sacrificing is two inputs. I think that is a really good price for the Rodecaster Duo, because it's essentially all of the same stuff as you've got in the Rodecaster Pro 2, and you're literally another way of saying it is, if the Rodecaster Duo is $500. It's an extra $200 to get another two mic inputs. And when I first saw that the prices announced, thanks Doc for dropping those in. The prices, that is. I'll just drop those up on the screen there. So that's $699 for. Whoops, wrong one. $699 for the. Where's that comment gone? There we go. $699 for the Pro 2, $499 for the Duo, and $399 for the Streamer X. So yeah, when I saw the price of the Duo, and I did see some people saying that they thought that was a bit expensive for comparatively, I just disagree, because it's got all of the same processing power as we've got in the Rodecaster Pro 2. And there are lots of people who are buying Rodecaster Pro 2s but not using the ports. And now they've essentially got a way to get all of the functionality that they were using at that lower price point. So I don't personally think that the $499, I think that was... I think that's that's a perfect price, really. Relatively, I think there's nothing to complain about there. In terms of the Streamer X being $399, if you look at something like, let's just sort of put this together. The Streamer X is a capture card. Now let's just take an industry standard capture card that streamers use these days. So I'll see what the price is right now. Elgato Camlink. And bear in mind, the Elgato Camlink, which is kind of like, so many people use this these days. Currently, it looks like it's on discount at the moment on Amazon, $91 instead of $99. But the Camlink 4K is usually regular price $99. So that's the Camlink 4K. If you then look at something like, let's stay with the Elgato range, the Elgato Wave, what's it called? Elgato Wave XLR. So the Elgato Wave XLR is regular price $160. Let's just take the regular price rather than any current discounts. The Wave XLR, which basically gives you a mic input, and then you can adjust, that's to take your mic in over XLR. And there was another one mentioned earlier, so I'm not sure quite what the price is of that. So that would be $160 plus the Elgato capture card, that's $260. So let's say that to get a mic input and a capture card, you've got $260. But bear in mind, that's not really what the Streamer X is doing. The Streamer X is doing so much more than that, because it's got all of the onboard processing. Now, RØDE's got Unify, and Elgato has got the Wave Link app as well, so that does work with that. Let's just bring up the Streamer X here as well. But the Streamer X is doing so much more than just a mic input, and all of the things that I'm talking about with the Rodecaster Pro 2 versus the Rodecaster Duo having all of this onboard processing, that really is the kind of the secret sauce, I think. And so having the Streamer X at $399. It's not really that much of a stretch more than the the combination of a capture card and some other mic interface, but having all of this onboard processing. Then when you couple that with using it with Unify to give you some of this audio routing, I mentioned earlier about one of the things that I love about the Rodecaster Pro 2 And also the Duo is the fact that we've got these 3 USB channels going in. And that's something that a lot of these audio interfaces don't. They may well have a lot of features going in and out. There was one that I was looking at recently, which is a new device from Mackie, which actually looks overly complicated and is massive for what it's doing. But it's still only got this one USB channel going in as far as I can make out. I'll have a better look at it. But that's one of the benefits of the Rode devices is these multiple USB channels. And the Streamer X has got 2 USB channels as well. So it's not just a mic input. It's also a way to do this audio routing. And when you couple that with Unify to then give you these hardware channels and also, you know, all this other stuff, it's just unbelievable. And all I'm doing right now is I'm comparing it to, you know, existing devices that, you know, are on the market. So the Elgato Camlink and the, you know, that one. I mean, I could have picked any one of these others. The amount of processing that these have got on board is frankly quite ridiculous compared to, you know, other things. So that is really the power of these is in the onboard processing. So I personally don't think that there is an issue with pricing on any of these things. It's the same actually about the pod mic. I've got a video to make all about the pod mic specifically. I did cover it in I did a stream a couple of weeks ago about the pod mic and the Streamer X. The pod mic, there were people who were saying, oh, I think this is a bit overpriced because the original pod mic was $99. Now we've got the pod mic USB and it is $199. Or it seems a bit expensive because it's, you know, it's just got the extra USB channel on it. It's like, yeah, well, okay then, but then let's put that into context with what it's actually got in it. And if you look at it compared to, where's mine gone? My Shure MV7, you know, if you look at it like for like with I'll say a comparable mic, you know, something that's got the same functionality. I find that the pod mic has got, you know, the USB and XLR the same as the Shure MV7. That was the reason why I originally bought my Shure MV7. But when you're using it over USB, the pod mic has got a whole load of the audio processing that we've got on the Rodecaster Duo and Rodecaster Pro 2, all on this microphone. And so actually, it's a lower cost than the Shure MV7, 200 versus 250 essentially. And yet this has, you know, noise gate and all of these kind of different things, the compressor and so on, that the Shure MV7, albeit it does have the Shure Motive app. I think that this is just a much more sort of full-featured mic as a USB mic. So I think they've nailed the prices, to be honest with you. And full disclosure, you know, they sent me these for review, but so yeah, I guess you could say, oh, well, it's easy to say that when they were sent to you for review. I can say I was already geared up to buy all of these devices as soon as they were announced, and I think that they're fine on the price there. So anyway, I've digressed enough on price, but I think that's fine. And thanks for the links, Doc. I knew you'd be posting my links. The $2 less is why I gave in and bought it. Yeah, it's that $1, isn't it, that always pushes people over the edge. So let's see. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Not trying to be funny, but you have to understand the licensing and regulatory costs for processing and being a world device. I guess for the things that they've got in the inside there that they're licensing. I guess that's the point there. We'll say someone who's used a lot of interfaces, not streaming platforms, just interfaces. For what RCP2 gives you, it does feel it's fairly priced. I'm Scottish and so traditionally tight. Oh, that's great. Whereabouts in Scotland are you? My parents are up in Aberdeen. I'm in the northeast of Thailand, so we're not close, but yeah. People who complain about pricing have never made anything. There are a lot of costs involved. Licensing for the compressor, the Neutrik. Oh, there you go. Yeah, the Neutrik combo jacks and DSP chips, LCD screen, and more. The other thing I'll say on this point as well about similar, when just in general about people who complain. I've seen people complaining about things that the Rodecaster can't do. Like it's got all this immense onboard power, and the internals. The internals are obviously not the same versus the. There was a great video from Rode, by the way, where they stripped down the Rodecaster Pro 2. I should go back and find that and drop it in the description, because that was what I really geeked out over that. I really loved that, where they stripped it down and showed you what everything was going on inside and all the different connectors and so on. But I digress. There's a lot of power that it's got in terms of being able to upgrade the firmware. And I do see people complaining, oh, it doesn't do this or it doesn't do that. It's like, yeah, but look at everything it can do. And I always buy things on the features that they have got and what it's going to do for me, not my imagination of what it may do some time down the line, and then get annoyed when it's not doing what I want it to do. It's just it just makes me laugh sometimes. But yeah, that's the same thing about the price. Everyone's just... Obviously, we'd all like everything to be $1, wouldn't we? That would be great, wouldn't it? If everything, take your pick, just whatever you want is $1, but it doesn't work like that. And people do complain without thinking sometimes. I think there are some awesome interfaces out here that offer auto gain settings, for example, that make them perfect for creators for control, features, and updates. RØDE is outstanding value. Thank you very much. These are all talking about pricing still. I think we've done this. It is indeed. It is 6:29 as we speak here in Thailand. Yeah, the software on the pod mic, and I did a demo of it. I mean, and the other thing about it is without going off onto the pod mic tangent, this one is you plug it into Rode Central, but then you can update you're basically updating it on the device. So then even if you don't have Rode Central open, it's still got all of those settings. And as I understand it, if you then go and plug it into another computer, it then also has those settings applied to it. So it's actually updating something in the device itself, as opposed to it just being, you don't need to have Rode Central open to do it. But you've got exactly the same level of detail in terms of what you can adjust on there. Actually, that's not quite true. You don't have some of the things. Maybe I'll run through the audio processing, but you do have like the ones that you want, like the compressor, the noise gate, and all of that kind of stuff. And in Canada now, 3 hours from Toronto, but originally from Edinburgh. Oh, thanks, Doc. That's the link to the RCP2 strip down. That is definitely worth a watch, because there you get a bit more of an understanding about what's kind of going on inside it. And when they talk about, these high gain, low noise amps, what is that actually? Well, it's not just a little chip. There is, physical hardware in there, obviously, that's doing this. And so it was really interesting to just see that and how that all looked when it was taken apart. I will just go through then and talk about... Oh, sorry, just one thing. I'm sorry, Victor, I just missed your comment there. I believe the Rode Streamer X has the HDMI out, so maybe closer to the Camlink. Well, that's the other thing, yeah. I mean, I mentioned the Camlink 4K just because it is, a capture device. But yeah, actually, you're right. It's the higher end or higher priced Camlink that we should be comparing this to, because it has got the throughput as well. It's got the pass-through. So you're spot on there. And I can't remember exactly how much that is, but... Yeah, there's no comparison to me for comparing the Rode Streamer X to just a capture card and a XLR to USB audio interface. It's just so much more than that. It's quite ridiculous. So yeah, I think not that anybody, not that they care, but I give it the pricing seal of approval. And it is indeed built like a tank. That's they all are actually, but the Rodecaster Pro 2, that teardown video was great. Anyway, let's talk briefly then about some of the audio settings. And as I say, I did do this in a complete live stream, which Doc linked to, and I'll go back and link to in the settings, or in the settings, in the description, if I can get my words out. So what I'll do is I'll come back to, there you go, the HX60. Sorry to come back to this. The HX60 is basically $200. Add to that the XLR Go, $150. So you're already up to $350. So the question is, if you want to take, have a pass-through capture card and you want to have an audio interface for your XLR mic, do you want to spend an extra $50 to get everything else that the Streamer X gives you? I would recommend that is probably a wise decision. So let's go through some of this audio processing. And as I say, I'm not going to go through all of this and exactly what it is all doing, but it is worth just mentioning here because it is one of the things that makes the Rodecaster what it is. Here we get into the processing and effects. So if you tap on any one of these mics or one of these inputs, I should say, and that is a point to note, you can apply these effects to your USB channels, to your Bluetooth channels. It's going to bring up this, and you've got some presets for different mics, as we've talked about. However, you can then go and make some adjustments. So these presets are essentially just presets for the advanced onboard processing that it has got. I'm going to just stay in that mic actually for the time being. So what I've done is I've used the pod mic preset to begin with, but I have gone through and actually changed a lot of this. Let me just go through and just show you a different mic to begin with. The basic processing that they've got, I say basic, it's a basic interface for the advanced processing. They've got this thing here, these three things. This is what they call their VoxLab, and they've got depth, sparkle, and punch. So tapping on one of those, this is for a different mic, but it's depth is going to add sort of more of that richness to the lower end tones. Sparkle is more of that higher end clarity and so on. And what all of these are doing, and then there's punch as well, which is adding some other elements to the device. But what these are all doing though is they're all controlling what's going on in the background. So they're controlling all of these different things that we've got in here. You can go into these individually though by clicking on the advanced processing. And what I'll do is I'll just go back to my main mic, because somebody mentioned hiss earlier on, and I wasn't sure what hiss they were talking about, whether it was hiss in the background of my voice. And you know, if that was introduced in the mic. I suspect that what they're referring to is actually my aircon. So going into these things, we've got the high pass filter. Just briefly, as I say, I did a whole video which is all about the advanced processing previously, and also obviously in the in the Rodecaster masterclass. But just briefly, what these are doing, the high pass filter is for knocking out lower end tones, and that could be from your you know, anything got going in the background, like the low hum of an aircon unit, for example, which I've tried to knock out some of it with this. So that's what the high pass filter for is, just removing certain lower end tones, or it may be even out of your voice. I mean, if I turn this all the way up here, you'll see that it knocks out the lower tones from my voice, which is not actually sounding great, but that's what that's for. Next is the de-esser. That is to remove those S sounds from your voice. And by the way, these you can turn on either globally or individually as well. Globally. What I mean is you can turn on or off the overall processing, or you can turn off the individual effects if you don't want to use the de-esser. Whoops-a-daisy, gone to the wrong one there. Next is the noise gate. That is the thing that I said, if I turn my noise gate off and stop waffling on for a while, you'll hear that there is this sort of constant thing in the background, which is my aircon, which you're going to hear as a hiss. So I don't know if you're hearing that. I can certainly hear it in my monitors. But that is the background hiss of my my aircon. And then when I turn the noise gate on, I have it so that my noise gate shuts completely so that the audio doesn't get through. Next is the compressor. That's essentially kind of leveling out the different volumes within your voice or whatever's going in, so you can have it so that it's basically going to compress those higher volumes and maybe boost up those lower ones to just make it so it's a lot more even, and you're not getting, you know, widely ranging audio volume coming through into your mix. And as I say, I explained what all these different things were in that previous live stream. Then we've got the equalizer here, which is an equalizer that you've got basically 3 different points of adjustment there. So you can adjust the low tones, the mid tones, and the high tones. And then you can adjust, you know, how much that is. By the way, if you just double tap on one of those, you can also adjust the sort of width. So as well as adjusting the amount there, where is it? Oh, it's actually press and hold. It's not double tap, it's press and hold. You can also adjust the sort of width that that's applying to. So if you look at that there, I'm really just applying that to that really thin area of those particular tones. But if I make that wider, then it is adjusting a much wider range of them, and then press and hold again, and it goes back to then being adjusting the level. So I think that's a sort of thing that people don't really see necessarily, especially if they haven't read the manual. But if you press and hold, it will actually change that setting there. Next is the exciter, and this is the big bottom, which adds richness to the lower end tones, and the aural exciter, which adds clarity and sparkle to the higher end. And then you've got the panning. So that is the advanced audio processing. Now on the PodMic USB, let's think which ones you get on there. You do get the high pass filter, do you? You get the de-esser, the noise gate, which don't you get? There's one of them that you don't get. You get the compressor, equalizer. I'm forgetting now. There's 1 or 2 of them that you don't get on there, but you do get the ones which I want, which is the noise gate, the compressor, obviously, and then which other one? I think you get the equalizer. But anyway, so this is the PodMic USB I'm talking about. It does have a lot of this onboard processing, certainly more than the MV7. I haven't really mentioned the smart pads. You can do all of the same things with the smart pads as you can do on here. So, for example, you could play a music bed if you wanted, and that would play through. You can also, what I need to be doing is I need to be listening to that. Let me stop that. Sorry for that. Let me just get this up. what's happening is I hadn't set that one to listen, so I couldn't hear. And then you can do all of the other effects. You can also apply those sound effects like things like the megaphone voice and all of that kind of stuff. Not something that I use, but I know people do. So if you want to add those kind of effects, you can do all of that in there. I mentioned before about using MIDI controller to actually use this dial, which I'm not going to use because I'm Billy No Mates. I don't have people in the studio with me. So this dial here for the second headphone socket is something that I'll likely be using for either for MIDI. I wonder actually if these can be changed later. I mentioned that they've got this, they are this rotary encoder with the push thing. I wonder if this might be able to be programmed at some point later so that one could be for headphone 1, this one might be for the headset on the front, potentially, who knows. But for the time being, I'll be using that with MIDI. Now you can access all of the different things on here from a MIDI point of view. Let me come into here. If I go into these smart pads, for example, you can assign a thing to it. So if I click on this one, click on here, the things that you can assign to the smart pads are either sounds, sound effects, so that is like the robot sound effect and things like that. There is mixer effects here, so you can add either the sensor button if you want to beep yourself out when you are talking nonsense. You've also got trash talk here. This is an interesting one. This is a button that allows you to basically have only you and the people in the studio will be able to hear each other. So that means if you've got another person in studio on a mic and on the headphones, then it's a way to talk trash about whoever else is watching or listening on the stream without anyone else hearing and anyone calling in apparently as well. So that's what that's for. Fade in and fade out. So these are actions where you press a button and it can maybe fade your music in or fade your music out whilst still being able to speak over the top of it. Or you can with this exclude host, or you can include the host if you just want everything to fade out. Back channel is where you can set up this stuff that I'm doing down here. I mentioned where I'm kind of listening to channels, but then I'm also doing some routing here of I'm listening to everything, but I'm removing the Discord from the stream. You can set up presets for that in here to decide what's going where, and then you press a button and it just applies that back channel. If you want to just have it so that you can just speak into the Discord maybe without it going out into stream momentarily, you could assign that to a button. And then you've got ducking, which is this is one thing that I've heard people saying that they want slightly more advanced control over this. It's not something I use personally, but at the moment the ducking is just one preset, which is basically if you have that on, then ducking is whereby anytime you speak, it's going to reduce the volume of everything else slightly so that you can be heard over the top of it. So typically with music, you've got a music track playing. If you put yourself into DJ mode, and then when you speak, it might just drop the music down as you're speaking and then automatically raise it back up again. Or indeed, if you are on a podcast and you want to speak over your guests, then it would technically work with that as well. But there isn't really any sort of fine-tune adjustment. That is just all that you get. That is what the ducking is. And these things can all be momentary or latching and so on. But there is also these MIDI controls here. So you can, if you've got some sort of MIDI device on or MIDI interface on your computer, then you can assign certain things to each of these buttons. But actually everything on the device is addressable as a MIDI controller. So if you're using something like Ecamm Live, and there is an application called ELMC, I've still got to make a video all about this, Ecamm Live MIDI controller. Although actually, Doc, if you're still there, I know you did a full run through of this, so maybe drop that video in. But you can use the Rodecaster Pro 2 with ELMC, Ecamm Live MIDI controller, and that means that then, technically, with a recent update to ELMC, you could actually assign a fader to, in fact, who was it earlier? Let me just backtrack myself. Because somebody earlier, and I forget, I do apologize exactly who said this. Somebody was asking about if you're using Ecamm Live with interview mode and you've got multiple guests, then can you actually adjust their levels independently on the Rodecaster? The answer to that is they do come in from Ecamm as a single channel. However, technically, what you could do is you could use ELMC to map one of the faders to interview guest 1 and one to interview guest 2, and so on. And then the fader would then become a control for that instead of the input or the output. So actually, I take it back. You could technically be using the Rodecaster to control the audio of your interview guests independently in Ecamm Live, albeit they would still technically be coming into the Rodecaster on a single channel, but you would be adjusting the volumes within Ecamm. because you can adjust volume in Ecamm independently, obviously, as well. I don't know if, incidentally, without going off onto a separate device, if you are using the Stream Deck Plus, the Stream Deck Plus has 4 dials. The Ecamm Live plugin has the ability to assign those dials to specific interview guests as well. So I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but that's actually what I do for my audio for guests. Is I have a dial on my Stream Deck Plus. I use their feature called Dial Stacks. So there's just one for interview guests, and then I can press the Stream Deck button to just cycle through all of the guests and then adjust their volume accordingly there. But yeah, the MIDI controls on it are give it another layer then of functionality. I'm also really interested with the Streamer X, the fact that they've added in this this feature with the Streamer X where you can control your PowerPoint or Keynote presentation. And that might seem like a small thing. It's just sending keystrokes, essentially, the left and right arrow, the escape key, and putting up a blank slide and so on. So with the Streamer X, you can do that with these little buttons. There's a presentation mode that then makes this forward and backwards, next slide, and so on. It is, though, a little bit intriguing as to, okay, now they're doing, inputs, key inputs on the pads themselves. So I wonder where that's going to go in terms of, are we going to get some sort of interface to be able to, a little bit like Stream Deck, to be able to program actions that are going to do things, other than just controlling an app. It's just one of these things that I found the Streamer X really intriguing for that point of view. It was a couple of firsts, really, this breakaway to be able to add that kind of functionality in. Keyboard actions on the device, and then also obviously the video capture element of Streamer X as well was intriguing from that point of view. So let's have a look. The Rodecaster Duo arriving tomorrow. Yes, you'll absolutely love it. Exactly, the high pass filter lets the high frequencies pass through. Noise gate fences out the noise. Yes, it is quite logical when you think about it. And what the thing that I find people get confused about, though, is when they first go into it, and as I say, this is why I created the course, this is why I did that live stream last week or the week before, is all of these different terms that are related to it. The threshold, the release, the attack, and yeah, it is all logical once it's explained, but people don't have that sort of base knowledge. But yeah, they do kind of what they say on the tin, as it were. Hello, Charlotte. Great to see you here. Arrived very late because I've been busy setting up my Duo that arrived today. Oh, congratulations. Must be exciting times. If you have got it, then go and check out that video as well, because today I've been obviously giving my thoughts and an overview of it. But if you're going through the setup process, then definitely check out that live stream. That I'll go and put it back in the description as well, but doc link to it. In fact, I'll leave it as the video to click through to at the end of this. But that was all about the audio processing, and that is really, as I say, the power of the Rodecaster Duo, as with the Pro 2 and the Streamer X, is to really dial in your audio. So definitely worth watching that one. Messing about with these processing settings, because it is really worth messing about with, because it make a huge difference to your audio. But there again, it's like, what do you do? There's also you need to understand the signal chain. I know you probably more than aware of this, Danny. But yeah, understanding the signal chain. Like if you go and adjust something right at the very end, the last thing in the chain, and then you come back and adjust something at the beginning, it is going to impact on those things. Some of the processing effects that you have are subtractive. They're sort of taking stuff away, like the de-esser. It's kind of technically removing something, isn't it? It's reducing the volume. The noise gate as well is removing something, albeit fairly simply. And the same with the high pass filter there as well. So if you then go and do something later on and then come back and adjust that will have a sort of knock-on effect. But again, I explain all that in the live stream from last week for those that are interested. And thanks for the link to Doc's ELMC video, Keely. Much appreciated. So the question then is, I'll just wrap this up because I'm going on for 2 hours here. The question then is, if you are thinking of getting one of these devices, the Rodecaster Pro 2, the Rode Streamer X, or the Rodecaster Duo, which one should you choose? And if you are just making that initial decision right now, he says, just trying to adjust my top-down shot to get all of these devices in shots. That was terrible, wasn't it? But if you are thinking about one of these, which one is going to be the one that you should go for? Really, with the Rodecaster Pro 2 and the Rodecaster Duo, the answer is simple. It's a case of if you need more than 2 XLR or maybe a jack input as well. If you need more than those 2 inputs, bearing in mind that this also has that headset as well. But if you've got more than 2 mics, then the Rodecaster Pro 2 has got the 4 inputs there. But if you don't see yourself using, if you've only got 1 mic or maybe one mic and a second mic, maybe a mic like this right in front of your face for your things, maybe you have a separate a boom mic, shotgun mic out of shot for other use cases, or you're going to use a mic like this and maybe one of the Rode wireless mics that you can pair with this, then this has got all of the same processing power as this one. And I know that I'm probably going to be recommending this to a lot more of my clients who are looking to do the sort of audio routing that I do with meeting platforms and present for their online meetings and presentations and things like that. And if you are a content creator that you want to have that finer control over your audio, but just taking your mic into your computer for your podcast, your videos for YouTube or whatever it is, or maybe you're a musician with a guitar and a mic going in. Yeah, the Rodecaster Duo has got all of the same power as this Pro 2, just in a smaller form factor. The Streamer X, where that sort of fits into this then, is, if you're looking to level up your audio and video in your Zoom meetings or Teams meetings or maybe your live streams or whatever, the Streamer X still gives you all of that same onboard processing. And this also has multiple mic inputs. So, I didn't really mention that when we talked about the XLR, the Elgato XLR. This, although it only has 1 XLR input, it does also have the headset input. So once again, you can use the headset with it as well. And it can also pair with a Rode wireless mic. When you use this with Rode Central, you're basically choosing one of those. So you press the button here and it picks either the main mic, the XLR mic input, or the headset, or the wireless mic. When you use this with Unify, you actually get all 3 of those. So you can have all 3 of those inputs simultaneously. So there is, another reason why this has got a lot of power in it. But you just don't have the faders. It's only got the it's only got the 2 USB channels. So it's got 2 USB cables, the same as this has, or these have, whereas these have actually got 3 USB channels over those 2 cables. So one of them has 2, one of them has 1. That said, who knows where things may go in the future with firmware updates. I've got no idea, but I wonder about, if there's any other capability of that further down the line. Who knows? But this is certainly something that can just sort of simplify your setup. If you've got a camera coming in, obviously it's removing a capture card out of the mix and then allowing you to plug your mic in. One thing I will say about all these devices, I've got these all plugged in at the moment, and I did run into an issue. I had a really strange thing where when I had the Rode Streamer X plugged in with the Rodecaster Pro 2, I noticed that 2 of the Rodecaster Pro 2 channels, suddenly the USB channels weren't being picked up by my computer, at least not. They were being picked up, but no audio was going in and out. And it turned out that this was down to the way that I'd got these routed through a dock. And you've always got to bear this in mind. If you do ever plug these devices in to your computer and maybe they don't show up or they're not behaving as you expect, don't automatically assume that it's the device. It could well just be the routing that you've got, and maybe it's too much going through a particular USB bus on your computer. The interesting thing interesting to me about that particular issue that I had with the Streamer X and the Rodecaster Pro 2 was that they were both plugged into separate docks, into separate sockets on the computer. And so I kind of didn't really initially think that was the issue. It's not like they were both plugged into the same thing. However, when I plugged it into a separate port on the computer, there was no issue whatsoever. So it wasn't anything to do with the devices themselves. It was down to the docks. Just a little digression, but it's worth just noting that. So the Streamer X as well has this capture and pass-through. So the way that I'm currently using this is my main camera is coming through here. Although the way that I will ultimately use this is for when I'm doing virtual presentations and I want to pass through a presentation from one computer and then have that go into the second. I'm also going to look at using the extra 2 USB sockets on here with that second computer to then pass through audio into my primary computer and then that can be routed on the computer into the Rodecaster Duo. Ordinarily, I think probably the majority of people are not going to be choosing like both of these devices together or two of these devices together. I would guess for the majority of people, they're going to choose the one that works for them. I'm interested to see where video go, though, with the whole... I am interested to see where they go with the whole video aspect. Because bear in mind, this is just kind of like the Rodecaster Streamer X, the Rode Streamer X is just their sort of first steps into the world of video. So yeah, the mind boggles as to where that might actually go in the future, and I'm really interested to see that. Let me just quickly wrap up here with this question. Out of curiosity, what would you recommend to serious indie podcaster, Alec? Duo for one person podcast with maybe guests down the line, or RCP2 with the... That just depends really on where you potentially see your show going. If you think that you are going to maybe be doing an in-person show with, you know, more than two people, then yeah, the Rodecaster Pro 2 gives you that scalability. I can't see me ever doing an in-person show with 4 people because of the fact that I'm generally speaking to people all over the world, and I'm in the northeast of Thailand. So yeah, and we do, I mean, there's the Creators Pod podcast. Let me just drop that in. The Creators Pod podcast, which I've just dropped a link into. And that is me, Keely, who's in the chat. And there's 6 of us on that podcast, but we just do that virtually over using Ecamm Live and using interview mode, and we come into there and we get all of our things separately. Incidentally, the episode that we've just recorded, which will be coming out next week, was all about gear acquisition syndrome, and this thing that we fall into as creators, where we potentially, you know, see the shiny objects and end up acquiring all of this tech gear. Long story short, the upshot that we all came to for this was, yeah, it's a case of just understanding your needs and buying what you need. But sometimes, you know, you can go down rabbit holes with this. But anyway, I digress slightly. But yeah, the Creators podcast is definitely worth a listen. And we, as I say, in the next episode, we talk specifically about some of these Rode devices as well. So to answer the question, though, and getting back to the question, if you can see a 4-person or 3-person in-person podcast in your future, then yeah, maybe the Rodecaster Pro 2 is definitely there. But if you're only thinking, you know, if you're only really going to be ever doing 1 or 2 people maximum, 1 or 2 mics max, the Duo is going to be fine for the vast majority of people. And it's also actually bought, come back to this price momentarily, it's also actually bought all of this processing power that is, for me, the core benefit of the Rodecaster Pro 2. It's now just suddenly brought it within reach of people who maybe previously felt that the Rodecaster Pro 2 was out of their price range. You've now got all of this for a lower price. So yeah, that's my final word on that, if I get to the right foot pedal pressed. Do we need to use loopback with the Rodecaster Duo when using Ecamm? No, that is actually the whole thing that this replaced for me. So before I had the Rodecaster Pro 2, I was using my Shure MV7 over USB, and I was using audio hijack to do some of that onboard processing to reduce background noise and things like that. And then I was using loopback to do some of the audio routing for Zoom calls and so on. So that is effectively what the Rodecaster has replaced in terms of, well, I say replaced, it's done a much better job of replacing it as well. But all of that routing you can do with the Rodecaster. Certainly if you're using Ecamm to go into Zoom and you want that 2-way audio, so maybe you want your audio to pass through into Zoom, but you also want to bring the Zoom participants into your Ecamm recording. If you want to have a back channel going in Discord, or maybe you're using Zoom ISO, so you've got Zoom ISO going with your speakers, you've got a Zoom meeting or a webinar going that you're pumping that into, and then you've also got Ecamm running. You've got those 3 channels. So the Rodecaster Duo is perfect for that, and that's why I mentioned at the beginning, it feels like they've designed this device for me. And yes, indeed, the podcast is indeed hosted on Captivate, Rich. Oh, Rich is here, of course. Another one of the P's from the Creators podcast. Let's have a look. It is indeed smart market positioning from Rode with the Streamer X, because of this thing of, I'm obviously always on about, you know, people leveling up their their in-meeting experience or their in-meeting presence online. So when they're giving presentations and things like that. And the real thing that I wasn't expecting. So when I saw this announced at NAB, I was all over it, albeit a little bit confused at the beginning because they mentioned you could do the routing with Unify, and Unify at that point hadn't been announced for the Mac. So I got into a bit of a fuss about that, thinking, oh, is it available on the Mac? But as it was, it works with Rode Central and also Unify, which is now in beta for the Mac and coming very soon. But it is very smart market positioning because although it's called the Streamer X, it is also very much aimed at people who just want to have that high quality audio and video going into their meetings. And the thing that really just surprised me was this integration with PowerPoint and Keynote. And I know that I've spoken to people who said this is actually what they really want. They just want to have these big buttons for start video, stop video, mute their mic, and they've got the big clear hardware buttons, and then next slide and previous slide. And it's just catered for a whole demographic there. So I think that is great. Oh, you've got yours today. The which one was that? The Rode Streamer X or the Duo? But yeah, the setup of both of them is really easy. I say really easy. I'm just noticing that Keely is in the Discord, and the setup is really easy, unless you have some issues with USB and various other different things. Let's have a look. You never use loopback personally. I always work things out a different way. Yeah, loopback was fine. I know that it was confusing for a lot of people sometimes. Well, confusing for some people some of the time. But yeah, the number of options available specifically across this range now. I mean, I think they've just done an amazing job. Just this range here is a huge amount of options. So, yeah. The Duo. Well, yeah, you must be over the moon with it now. It's a really nice device. Anyway, I'll leave it there unless there are any further last questions. Yes, let's not bring up your Streamer X experience. The old PTSD kicking in. But anyway, if there are any final questions on any of these devices, if you are watching on the replay, then do feel free to drop those into the comments. Or better still, why not head over to the Take One Tech Discord community, so you can join that at takeonetech.io/family. It's free to join, and there's no sort of paywall up there. You can just go in and join in the conversation, or if you've got any questions, that's actually the easiest way to get hold of me. I do fall behind on my YouTube comments. Thank you very much, Danny. I'm glad you find them useful. So yeah, I will be doing a formal video about the Rodecaster Duo as well, a little bit more concise than this 2-hour one. But if you are watching on the, sorry, just one last question. Can I connect a Scarlett with 2 mics via USB to the Rode X? I assume 2 channels would be a single mix. I'm just thinking 2 mics via USB to the Rode X. The input that you've got on the back of the Rode Streamer X, although you can connect it to an external device like a phone or a tablet, and I understand the Rode PodMic USB can also connect over USB into the Duo. I'll have to check that. I'm just thinking, I haven't tried that out, but I think so. I'm not sure that you can take like a Scarlett, or at least I don't think you can take a Scarlett and plug any USB mic into it. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, otherwise it would be going into the computer and then you would route it into there. So it's kind of, yeah, obviously you've got the Scarlett because you want the 2 mic inputs. Yeah, I don't think that wouldn't just route through the Stream X. I was just thinking if there was a workaround to it, but no, it wouldn't go through that. But you could take it into the computer and then have it going through Unify and have it routing that way while still also combining some of the stuff from the Streamer X. But yeah. Yeah, so the thing about, it will be a single mix, but I'm just meaning about it going into actually plugging into the Streamer X itself as opposed to going into the computer. I don't think it will. Cool. Anyway, well, with that said, I hope you've found that useful. And if you are watching on the replay, what I'll do is I'll go back after the fact and I'll leave a link to the stream I did just last week, a couple of weeks, all about the advanced audio processing and how to get that set up on your Streamer X or on your Rodecaster Duo or Rodecaster Pro 2. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.